Right, good afternoon guys. Hope everyone is doing well. So as a part of our case analysis today, we are going to talk about the brand ZTE. Is anybody aware of ZTE? It's great. Okay. So before we proceed, we want to introduce my beautiful teammates.
My name is Myra Madrano. Ruja Patel.
Lavanya Reddy.
Isolde Jata.
And I'm Vinay Padapani. Alright, let's get in. So, ZTE, let's go to the history first. It's a 33-year-old company. It started off in 1985. It was a private and state-owned entity. It became public in the year 1997. It's listed on both the Shenzhen and Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And it is one of China's leading and largest mobile phone manufacturers. As you can see the numbers, it has a revenue of $16.7 billion and total assets worth $22.1 billion. And this is as of 2017. Alright, it operates in three business units primarily. One is carrier networks, terminals, and telecommunication. We'll be getting into this story into this when later. Alright, some facts about the company. So, a large number of ZTE's clients and customers are based outside China. If we take USA as a market, as of 2017 again, it had a 12% market share and it was the fourth largest phone brand in Northern America after Apple, Samsung, and LG. And in the USA, ZTE phones are offered as low cost or discounted phones by major carrier networks. Alright, I'll be passing it on to Myra and she'll be taking it further. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinay. So who are the key players that help grow ZTE to $1 billion entity? Well, some of its customers, some of it you may know, it's Sprint, T-Mobile, and AT&T. Most of the mid-tier phones, as Vinay mentioned, it is the fourth largest maker of mobile phones in the US and around the world. But it also has an international footprint. And they work with Telstra Corp, which is Australia's largest wireless carrier, as well as MTN Group Ltd, which is a wireless carrier out of Africa. Its suppliers, though, the mobile operating system that they utilize come from the Android system, so they work with Google. In addition, 8 out of the 25 key components in their cell phone comes out of a chip maker in San Diego called Qualcomm, as well as a flash memory supplier that we all know, SanDisk, out of California. But this entity landed in some pretty hot water, actually some pretty boiling water, with the US government as it faced US sanctions. So I'll hand it over to Pooja and she'll explain the timeline.
Thanks, Myra. So I'll talk more about ZTE's timeline and how it got to where it is today. So in 2012, ZTE violated trade sanctions, US trade sanctions, and it did this because it sold banned technology to Iran and North Korea. And essentially, it tried to conceal some of those transactions. So between 2012 and 2016, it was involved in some legal disputes, and as we all know, legal disputes are solved overnight. So 4 years later, in 2016, ZTE was placed by the Department of Commerce onto what is known as the Entity List. And what the Entity List is a compilation of foreign companies that are subject to specific license requirements for the export of certain items. And in this case, there was a three-month licenses were granted to US companies so that they could export to ZTE. And in March 2017, ZTE and the Department of Commerce entered into a settlement agreement. And what the settlement agreement said was that ZTE was required to pay $892 million in penalties. ZTE was placed onto a 7-year probationary period. They were removed from the Entity List. However, the denial order was issued, albeit suspended, and they were subject to monitorship by the Department of Commerce. And this is an example of a legal brief that was filed in Texas, and it just goes to show how severe the penalties were for the ZTE Corporation that the Department of Commerce imposed onto them. And it uses language that's really strong, knowingly and willfully conspiring and agreeing with others to perform some of the violations that did occur. And now I will hand it over so you can talk more about the ZTE denial order.
Thank you, Pooja. So with the denial order, there's this looming threat for ZTE. And let me tell you a little bit more about the denial order. So what this does is it bans U.S. companies from exporting any components, any parts to ZTE. And it also bans importing ZTE products into the U.S. So it has the potential to basically cripple what ZTE can do. Now, although the denial order is suspended as part of that settlement agreement, that threat continues to be there. So if ZTE violates any part of the settlement agreement, this denial order can be activated. So with all the worries about this denial order, they do start to implement some serious global compliance changes. They have a new compliance committee that's led by the CEO. They appoint Matt Bell as Chief Compliance Officer, and they've provided over 132,000 pages of documents to the Department of Commerce. They cooperated in real time with U.S. court-appointed monitors, and they've invested $50+ million in their export control compliance program. And that included training 65,000 employees on compliance. So I'm going to continue with the timeline that we just started. So you'll notice, like in April 2018 is when their troubles really started. Through their internal compliance programs, they actually self-identified that there were some issues. They noticed that 4 senior officials had been fired that were involved with the original violation, but 35 other employees that were involved in the violations were given bonuses. So this was a big problem. Once the Commerce Department was made aware of this and they self-reported this, the Commerce Department was not pleased. They activated the denial order. So basically, that shuts down what they're able to do. They also imposed a $1 billion penalty that was paid in June. And ZTE could neither import or export anything from the U.S. July 2018, just 2 months ago, another settlement agreement was agreed upon. And with that, they put $400 million into escrow in addition to everything they've already paid in penalties and fines. There was a 7-year probationary period before where they were under the settlement agreement terms, and that got extended to 10 years. And with this agreement, the denial order is once again suspended. So from that period between April and July, that 3-month period was a time of like ambiguity and uncertainty for the company. Their entire existence is threatened. They're banned from exporting components from the U.S. Their customers are unable to do any business with ZTE. So ZTE actually voluntarily stops trading on both stock exchanges. And they cease all major operations, manufacturing, shipping, everything. They have almost 80,000 employees worldwide. They were going to work and they couldn't do any work. They couldn't do anything. So this went on for 3 months. This had a huge impact on their revenue. I think more than $1 billion of sales. So I'm going to turn it over to Zilda, who's going to talk a little bit about the political climate at this time.
Thank you. So at the time this was going on, Washington and Beijing were in trade disputes over aluminum and steel. So having these harsh penalties placed on ZTE caused frustrations to rise in China, which isn't the best thing because China is our #1 goods partner. They're our #1 in goods, they're 4th in agriculture, and the U.S. has also invested $107.6 billion in the stock there. This also revealed that China is very dependent on the semiconductors sent over from the U.S. So there was a meeting from Chinese officials where they discussed a speedier and more aggressive way of becoming technologically independent. In order to fix this problem, the U.S. administration met with the Chinese administration to discuss a compromise. The settlement agreement that they came to is that ZTE would pay $1 billion in penalties, they would put $400 million in escrow, and that the denial order was suspended so ZTE could resume operations with the caveat that there would be a 10-year enforcement period. So if they violated U.S. sanctions again, the denial order would become active. As of this moment, this is what ZTE has posted on their website, showing that they're ready to move forward and work with the U.S. What we're interested in studying is what the ramifications have been for ZTE and if there's a ripple effect with China and U.S. trade relations. Thank you.
Any questions?